Part 1. The Quiet Neighborhood. It was a typical Friday evening when I moved into that house. The kind of suburban neighborhood that could have been lifted from any movie. Quiet streets, manicured lawns, and the kind of calm that makes you feel like nothing could possibly disturb the peace. I remember walking through the door, feeling a strange comfort in the ordinary. There was no reason to expect anything out of the ordinary. Just a fresh start in a new place. But it didn't take long for things to feel off. At first, it was subtle. The kind of thing you could easily brush off. Like when I'd be sitting on the couch and think I saw someone pass by the hallway mirror out of the corner of my eye. I'd quickly glance over, expecting to see a neighbor walking past the window, but there was no one there. Or when I'd hear the soft thud of footsteps from upstairs when I knew no one was home. I chalked it up to being in an unfamiliar place. Maybe the house settling. But the odd moments didn't stop. They got worse. It was one evening, a few weeks into living there, that things took a turn. I had just finished unpacking, and the house was unusually quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels heavy, as though it's pressing in on you. I had made myself dinner, and after eating, I was cleaning up when I heard it again. The sound of footsteps from the hallway upstairs. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. But then it happened again, louder this time. A series of deliberate steps. Someone walking around, pacing the hall. I froze in place. I called out, "Hello?" But there was no answer. The sound stopped, just like that. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked upstairs, checking every room, but no one was there. The house was empty, except for me. But the silence that followed felt suffocating, as though I was no longer alone. I stood in the hallway, trying to make sense of it, when I heard something even more disturbing, the soft shuffle of feet behind me. I spun around, expecting to see someone standing there, but again, nothing. My heart started to race, and I could feel the air grow heavier. I rushed back downstairs, locked the door, and sat in the living room, trying to calm myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching me. Part 2. The Dark Figure. For the next few nights, I couldn't escape the feeling that I wasn't alone in the house. Every time I turned off the lights, there was a dark shape in the hallway, barely visible, but always there. I tried to ignore it at first. Maybe it was just my tired eyes playing tricks on me. But the more it happened, the more real it felt. I'd stand in the kitchen, washing dishes, and out of the corner of my eye, I'd see the figure standing in the hallway, as though it was waiting, watching. I finally decided to get to the bottom of it. One night I stayed up late, determined to catch whatever it was. I set up my phone to record, placing it near the hallway, aiming at the spot where I'd always see the figure. The idea was simple. If I could capture something on camera, I'd have proof. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. I waited for what felt like hours, the house eerily quiet around me. Then, just as I started to doze off, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone walking slowly down the hallway. The same slow, deliberate steps. My heart began to race. I grabbed my phone, pointing it toward the hallway, my eyes glued to the screen. That's when I saw it. A dark figure appeared at the end of the hallway, standing just out of the frame, too tall to be a normal person. It was a silhouette, shifting and twitching unnaturally. It didn't move like a person. It was almost like it was swaying in place. The air around it seemed to pulse, and the closer I looked, the more the figure seemed to distort. It was like it was trying to take shape, but couldn't quite get it right. I couldn't breathe. I watched the video over and over, but each time I felt a coldness creep up my spine. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the house. I went to a friend's place, too shaken to stay in my own home. But when I came back the next day, the video was gone. I searched through my phone, desperate to find it again, but it had vanished. Just like that. No trace. As though whatever it was didn't want me to have proof. Part 3. The Last Encounter. By this point, I was no longer sleeping. I had moved my bed into the living room, away from the upstairs hallway where I had seen the figure. But no matter where I went, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. It was always there. The suffocating sense that something was in the house with me, waiting for the right moment to make its move. Then, one night, it finally happened. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was that familiar sensation. The one you get when you know someone's standing behind you, even though you can't see them. I turned around, expecting to see one of the neighbors, but the room was empty. And yet, the pressure in the air had thickened. It was as if the room was closing in on me, and then I saw it. The figure was standing in the hallway again, only this time it was different. It wasn't just standing there, it was moving towards me, slowly but deliberately. I froze. My heart felt like it was going to explode in my chest. My feet felt rooted to the floor as the figure approached, its presence growing heavier with each step. It stopped just a few feet away, and for a moment, everything was still. Then it spoke. It was only a whisper, but it was loud enough for me to hear. The voice wasn't human. It was garbled, distorted, as if something was trying to communicate, but couldn't. The words were incomprehensible, but the feeling behind them was clear. It was angry. It wanted me gone. I don't remember how I got out of the house that night. I just remember running, not stopping until I reached the street. I never went back. To this day, I don't know what that thing was, or why it haunted that house. I don't know if it was a ghost, a figment of my imagination, or something else entirely. But I'll tell you this, whatever it was, it wanted me to leave. And it got its wish. Part 1. An old house and new beginnings. It was a small house, one that many would consider a fixer-upper, but to me it felt like the perfect place to start fresh. I had been through a rough time, and the idea of a place to call my own, away from the noise of the city, seemed like the perfect solution. The house was an old Victorian, perched on the edge of a quiet town. With its creaky floorboards, aging windows, and the strange smell of dust and age in the air, it felt like something out of an old mystery novel. The first few days were uneventful. I spent most of my time unpacking, trying to make the house feel less like a stranger's and more like mine. But there was something odd about it, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. The house felt too quiet, too empty. Even the outside world seemed muffled, like the house was shut off from the rest of reality. I explored every room, checking for repairs and making sure everything was in order. It wasn't until I made my way to the attic that I found something strange. It was tucked away behind a pile of old, forgotten boxes, a large, ornate mirror. The frame was covered in dust, and the glass was so clouded it was hard to make out my reflection. I figured it was just an old relic from previous tenants, left behind for me to deal with. But there was something unnerving about the way the mirror seemed to glimmer, even in the dim light, as if it were hiding something. But I dismissed it. It was just an old mirror, nothing to worry about. I went downstairs trying to focus on other things, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something about the attic and that mirror had left me with an uncomfortable feeling. I told myself it was nothing. After all, it was just a mirror. But that night, things changed. Part 2. The reflection that wasn't mine. I had just finished my dinner and was sitting in the living room watching TV when I noticed it. A flicker, barely perceptible, in the corner of my eye. A movement I couldn't explain. I turned my head to look, but nothing was there. It was so subtle that I almost convinced myself it was just my imagination, but the feeling stuck with me. The feeling of being watched, of something not quite right. It wasn't until I went to bed that the oddities started to escalate. I had fallen asleep quickly, the weight of the day's tasks pulling me under. But I awoke to something strange, a sound coming from the attic. It was soft at first, like the scratching of nails against wood, but it grew louder, more deliberate, as if something was moving around up there. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. I told myself it was just the house settling, but that nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't let me relax. I got up and walked quietly toward the attic stairs, trying to ignore the cold chill creeping up my spine. The sound stopped the moment I opened the attic door. I switched on the light, scanning the dark space. Everything was still. Nothing was there, except for the mirror. It stood in the far corner of the attic, exactly where I had left it. But something was different. The glass had cleared. I could now see my reflection perfectly. But it wasn't just me looking back. There, in the reflection, was a figure standing behind me, a man, tall and thin, with dark, hollow eyes. I spun around, but there was no one there, just the empty attic. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the mirror. I slowly approached it, my hand trembling as I reached out. I ran my fingers over the frame, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. But when I looked into the glass again, the figure was gone. I couldn't bring myself to go back upstairs that night. The mirror was like a magnet, pulling my gaze toward it. But I had to resist. I turned off the light and went back to bed, heart racing. I tried to sleep, but all I could hear was that scratching sound from the attic, like something or someone was waiting for me. Part 3. The mirror's final revelation. The days that followed were filled with strange occurrences. The mirror seemed to call to me, its presence growing stronger. I would wake up to find it reflecting more than it should. Images of people that weren't there, fleeting shadows in the corners of my vision. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling of being watched became overwhelming. The mirror was no longer just a reflection. It had become something else. Then one night, it all came to a head. I had come home late from work, exhausted, but when I walked into the house, something felt off. It was quiet, too quiet, but the silence was different this time. It was oppressive. The air seemed heavier, thicker. I could feel my breath catching in my chest, my pulse quickening. I hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, staring up toward the attic. That mirror was waiting for me. I could feel it, and this time I couldn't avoid it. I had to know what was happening. With each step I took toward the attic, the feeling of dread grew stronger. When I reached the top of the stairs, I could see the mirror's reflection, even in the dim light. But it wasn't the same as before. The figure was there again, only this time he was standing right behind me, and he was smiling. My heart skipped a beat and I turned quickly, but there was no one there. Nothing but the empty attic. I approached the mirror, my breath shallow, trying to steady myself. As I stared into the glass, I saw the man's face again, but this time it was different. His eyes weren't hollow anymore. They were full of rage, twisted in a way that made my stomach turn. And then, without warning, the reflection reached out of the mirror, grabbing my wrist. I screamed, but no sound came out. I pulled away, stumbling backward, my heart hammering in my chest. The mirror's glass cracked, the sound deafening in the silent house. The man's face contorted in anger as the reflection started to distort, flickering in and out of focus. I ran down the stairs, out of the house, and never looked back. To this day, I don't know what that thing in the mirror was, or if it was ever truly gone. But I'll tell you this, I don't trust mirrors anymore. Not after what I saw, and I'm never stepping foot in that house again. Part 1. The Road That Never Ends. It was supposed to be a simple road trip, a weekend getaway to the mountains, just me and my car. I'd been looking forward to this for weeks, craving some solitude away from the noise of the city. The drive was long, but nothing I wasn't used to. The road stretched out in front of me, flanked by tall trees that seemed to close in as I drove deeper into the wilderness. It was late, almost midnight, but the weather was clear and the stars filled the sky, guiding my way. I had passed the last town hours ago, the streets gradually becoming more desolate. The closer I got to my destination, the quieter the road became, until it felt like I was the only person left in the world. The only sound was the hum of my car's engine and the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. But then the strange things started happening. At first, it was nothing too alarming, just small signs that didn't quite make sense. The rearview mirror seemed to show things that weren't there, like a flicker of movement in the back seat when I knew I was alone. I told myself it was just shadows, the kind you see when you're driving at night. But the longer I drove, the more persistent these oddities became. Every time I glanced in the mirror, there was a figure sitting in the back seat. Only it wasn't there when I turned around. I could feel my heart rate increase, a chill crawling up my spine. I told myself it was exhaustion. The darkness was playing tricks on me. But when the figure appeared again, this time clearer, sitting upright, a man in a black jacket with his face hidden in shadow, I nearly slammed on the brakes. I looked in the rearview mirror again, but he was gone. Just like that. Part 2, the voice from the back seat. I should have turned around and driven back to the nearest town, but something kept me going. Maybe it was the quiet stubbornness in me, or maybe I thought I'd shaken whatever it was that I'd seen. But I couldn't ignore the feeling. The pressure that had settled in my chest, the strange unease that seemed to grow with every passing mile. An hour later, I pulled off onto a small, isolated road that led to my destination. The trees were thicker here, casting long shadows over the road, and the only light came from my headlights and the stars above. I didn't know why, but something in the air felt off. The silence was so profound, it almost felt like the forest was holding its breath. I pulled over to check my map, as I wasn't entirely sure if I was on the right path. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that had slowly been growing since I first saw that figure in the mirror. The car was still running, and I left the door open, just for some air. And that's when it happened. I heard a voice, low, gravelly, and chilling. It came from the back seat. "Where are you going?" it asked, and the sound of it was so real, it was as though the words were right next to my ear. I froze. My blood ran cold. I spun around to look, but no one was there. The back seat was empty, just like it had been when I first started the trip. I was alone, but the voice had been so clear, so tangible, that I couldn't deny what I'd just heard. I locked the doors, panicking. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I started the car again, my foot heavy on the gas pedal. I had to get out of there. But the road seemed to stretch endlessly in front of me, each turn leading to more emptiness. The voice came again, this time louder, more urgent. "Turn around." The car swerved as I quickly looked into the rearview mirror. There was nothing there, nothing at all, but the pressure in my chest was so intense I could hardly breathe. The quiet that followed the voice felt suffocating. My mind raced and I fought against the instinct to pull over and drive back home, but something kept me moving forward. I had to finish what I started. I don't know why I didn't stop, but the drive felt like it was never going to end. Part 3. The Endless Road. I don't know how long I drove that night. Hours? It felt like days. Every time I glanced at the rearview mirror, the figure was there, seated behind me, always just out of focus, always watching. The road ahead seemed to curve endlessly, stretching on into the dark forest, the trees becoming thicker, almost suffocating. By the time I reached the cabin, I was nearly shaking. My eyes were blurry from exhaustion, and the weight of whatever was happening was starting to break me. But when I pulled into the driveway, I realized I was not alone. There was someone standing in front of the cabin, waiting. I wasn't sure how I could see this person so clearly, but it felt as if my mind had been stretched to its limit. I knew I was going to lose it, but I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, unmoving, staring directly at me. But it was the eyes that I couldn't forget. The eyes that didn't belong to anyone I knew. Empty. Hollow. They seemed to pierce through me, as if they could see straight into my soul. I should have turned around right then and there. I should have gotten back in my car and driven away, but my body wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, watching the figure with a mix of terror and curiosity. The figure spoke. "Don't you see? You've been driving for hours. You'll never leave." The voice sent a chill down my spine, and in that moment everything snapped into place. The voice in the car, the figure in the mirror, it had all been leading to this. I hadn't been on a road trip. I hadn't been driving to the cabin. I had been on this road for hours, maybe days, unable to escape. The road had no end. The figure in the mirror, the voice from the back seat, they were part of it. Part of the endless loop that would never let me go. I don't remember how I got back to the car, but when I looked out the window, the figure was gone. The road was empty, just like it had been when I first started. But I knew one thing for certain. The road had no end, and I'm still driving. Sometimes the things we see in the dark are only the beginning. The more we drive into that unknown, the more we uncover. But just as easily as we think we've escaped, we find ourselves right back where we started. The endless loop. It never really ends, no matter how far you go, no matter how fast you drive. And perhaps that's the real horror. When you look in the mirror and the reflection isn't your own. When you hear a voice and you realize it's not calling you to stop, it's calling you to keep going, just like me. So next time you drive into the dark, be careful. Because some roads, once you start, don't let you leave. End of script. Sleep well.